Okay, well, welcome everybody. I am Tiffany Lane here at KSNV in Las Vegas, and we're talking to parents from all across the Vegas Valley about issues important to them in our Clark County Public Schools. Now, thank you all for being here today and joining us. I know back to school is very important to all of you. You have children of all different ages at schools all across the valley. So I wanted to just get into some of the issues you've told me already are important to you. Lenny Lyther, you are a parent and also a teacher of two, and you have two students in the Clark County School District. You have a very interesting perspective because you see things from both the educator standpoint and the student standpoint. Tell me about how that impacts some of the things you're seeing with what's happening with your students in our schools.
Well, it makes it complicated, honestly. I see a lot of violence in the district as a teacher and as a parent. When my son complains to me about bullying and I don't see enough action being taken to stop it, and I sometimes see that as a teacher as well. Also then sometimes feel like I could be doing a better job for them, just keeping them home and teaching them. So it just makes it hard to know what to do to make it right for my own kids.
How many of you, a show of hands, have concerns about violence and safety in our schools? Okay, a few of you. Would somebody else like to? Nancy, I believe you spoke to me about this. Tell me about your safety concerns.
In middle school and a son at Coronado in high school. And violence and safety is a huge concern. And I've been very diligent in being intentional on where they go, to minimize some concerns. However, the school's overpopulated, the teachers are doing the best they can. I genuinely feel that way. But there's definitely a disconnect in how things are handled, in my opinion, as a parent. We kind of get closed off at some point on what actually was done and what things are in place for your child. And I know some of it is for the safety and protection and identity of the person, the person who's bullying. But as the person who's loves and wants to protect their child, it's really disconcerting because you don't get all the answers. And you report things and you say things and then they're like, okay, we'll handle it. And then your kid still comes home afraid. And the risks are a lot greater than I feel like when I was growing up.
Anna Binder, we have, yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to add on to that. I feel that the district treats parents who advocate for their children as nuisances. And so we need to build a better relationship between parents and between the homes and schools. Just saying that they want a good relationship just isn't enough.
And I was going to kind of touch on what Nancy and Jessica said, because currently we've had presentations in our community where the data is discrepant to the data that the state is getting with regard to the bullying. As many parents, I hope, know that not this past session, but the session before, they passed laws for the collection and reporting of bullying. So the state, I guess, could see and lawmakers could see, and we're not getting good data. And I believe that goes along with Nancy's concern, and a lot of parents' concerns. I hear what she said so many times a week, that the transparency is just not there. And then, right, are there other things we need to do to help protect our children that, are we really ever being told the totality sometimes? Because I know, when I get letters in the mail for my son, they just say, hey, your kid was involved. And that's about it. Even I believe on one that they substantiated, it really didn't say much. And it's personally really difficult for me to get a true story out of my son. So I have to rely on staff to tell me or not tell me. So I know that we are working on that because of that underlying issue. And then to Jessica, I spend almost 80% of my time trying to educate and help parents on how to be their own best advocate. which requires relationships, not just with the teacher, but the staff in the office, the principal, attending your SOTs, and even volunteering into your PTAs or PTOs if you have them. And if not, maybe start one.
Go ahead, Jessica. I know you're responding to Anna.
Yeah, sorry. We have a large amount of families in our district, though, who cannot attend those events because they're not accessible to the many work schedules that our hardworking families have in the district. And that's another issue, is that we need to figure out how we can better support the engagement of families, because right now we only offer, open house at one time. We only offer family nights one time. It's not like, conferences where you have like a whole day to kind of make a schedule. And so I think that just saying that parents need to be involved just isn't enough. Like there needs to be actual due diligence from the district to actually try and support our access to building these relationships.
And what's really frustrating about that is that's actually a requirement for federal funds, for federal grant funds. Any local education, district, not just Clark County, but they have to be maintaining effort. I think the proper term is time. Into the resources that they provide, into family engagement and whatnot. And it's actually kind of funny. I think Camilla was there one day at a board meeting, and they said that they had like over 800 family events in the 2021-2022 school year. And I looked over at her and I was like, when? Where? Because what's their definition? Because it's very clear, however the district is viewing their family engagement efforts, it is not adequate, and it is not well distributed across Clark County.
How many of you would like to see more transparency from the district, or a show of hands believe that there isn't enough transparency from our schools in our district? Okay, so a majority of you. Rudy, why don't we hear from you about what your concerns are with some of the transparency?
Well, I think with the transparency, it's like, they can say everything that they're doing, but ultimately, that messaging is likely unheard by the parents. It can be through whatever app they select to partner with for the school year. My son's only going into second grade, so I only have 2 school years under my belt with him. He's had 2 different apps. You get your robocalls on the week, or you get emails that get picked up by spam. So I know there's an effort that's occurring from the school that my son's going to, but they need to maybe find better ways, or work with parents to identify feedback of what's the best way to message them, what's the best way to get some of these points across, these urgent newsletters and so on. Because it's they are doing their part, they're sending things out, but it's likely not being heard or received by many of the parents. And it's not like they're trying to not pay attention to their inbox or anything. It's just that we're just not getting the messaging sometimes. It's frustrating because everyone's frustrated. As a parent, we're frustrated. I'm sure as the school administration, they're frustrated because they feel like they're doing the work, which, they certainly can be. But there's just missed opportunities between that relationship.
And Melvin, I know that you've talked about engagement with parents, and I know there was a safety question I wanted to ask you as well, because I know that's one of the main things you were speaking to me about. Why don't you talk about those 2 topics?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I concur with Jessica, Nancy, and Anna with regard to safety. And more specifically, obviously, we have seen an uptick in gun violence within schools across the country, which is, of course, a pressing concern for any parent who, has the potential to have a child who is succumb to potential gun violence. So obviously that is a major concern. And even to add to that point, one of my pressing concerns being obviously an African-American parent and looking at the disproportionate ratios of suspensions and expulsions with regard to African American students who only make up, I believe, 15% of the CCSD population as of 2020, but yet are being suspended and expelled at a 79-40% rate, 79 to 40% rate, as I said before, respectively. So that is obviously a major issue with the passing of AB 285, I believe is what it is. Obviously, it does not require schools to have a restorative justice plan in place. It just says it's recommended essentially, but is not required, and restorative action practices are statistically and also academically reinforced to be an effective measure to reduce juvenile incarceration, recidivism, and all of those problematic issues that exist for students who are being punished for issues that their other counterparts may not have been punished for.
Can I speak to Melvin?
Yes, please, Nancy.
Absolutely. I am raising a brown son in America, and I have tons of concerns and fears. I actually have a school that has a restorative justice program, and I was not happy with it. And I push back. I'm definitely one of those parents that is deemed probably a nuisance, and I have the relationships, but I am consistent and unrelenting with my children and their safety, and being seen as whole people. And, you know, my son has definitely learned about microaggressions. And I think my issue with our district is that there's no representation on the teacher side, you know, so I don't entirely, it's a lack of education. And I have spoken to them. I love what Rudy said about feedback. He's absolutely right. I get reminds, Canvas, text messages, emails, but when there's something I actually really want to know, I get, oh, we can't share that because of policy. And that's the frustrating thing. I'm inundated with things that I think are useless. And when I really think things are life-threatening, literally, I am placated, especially for me as a parent of color in Henderson.
I would just like to add to Nancy's point. Clark County School District is supposed to be a district, right? And a district is a unified body of individuals. However, that unification isn't necessarily present, to Nancy and Rudy's point. And it's almost like it's pockets of areas work succinctly together. It's almost like a silo. And that is a major issue with us as parents, I believe, and it seems to be a concurrent agreement with everybody that these silos are preventing effective communication to the parents who matter, because learning starts at home. So if we're not being informed of what's going on with our children, we're not being informed of the issues or the problems that exist with our children, how can we help the teachers and the administration to better improve the school district and better improve the learning environment for our students?
Tiffany,
Okay.
real quick for Melvin.
Yeah.
I hear every word you're saying, but a lot of us have fought really hard for decentralization. And so I believe a lot of the silos were created by AB 469, which gave our individual school sites the power, more power. I mean, it's not perfect. It's the beginning and it's ever changing right now, but it was the response, you know, back then years ago to breaking the district up because it is too big. And so it empowered our local school sites to have their school organizational teams. And that's why I said in the beginning, to what like Nancy and Jessica said, just because you can't attend a meeting, everything is on your school website, the meeting minutes, the notifications, the agendas. If an item comes up that's of that super grave importance to you, you don't even have to attend. You can submit your written public comment. You can notify other teacher or parents while you're standing at the bus stop or, you know, at the school pickup line. I do that all the time. I show up 20 minutes early every day, morning and afternoon, just to talk to all of the parents standing outside of our special education gate. So it's not something personally I would advocate back against. Our silos, Melvin, because we do need that centralization, but there is an answer to the disconnect that our families feel with the district. And our SOT does take a survey, just so you know. And that was upon request a couple years ago for a parent like Rudy, whose kids had just started, and they asked us to ask parents, what did you use the most? And so in addition to like that main, CCSD push out email, we had like 90% of our respondents to that survey said, what is it? Dojo? Or what is that? Class Dojo? And that's been wonderful. And just super quick, as an SOT member and a PTA member, we hear crickets in our and I'm on 2 different schools. We hear crickets from parents despite all of our outreach until we're hosting a free event or, a free family event, and we can't get volunteers and we can't get donations, we have to be super creative. But the predominant large turnouts that we get at our school sites for families and parent engagement come with activities, not meetings.
Lenny, go ahead. I know you've been trying to comment.
I want to say a couple things. Well, first of all, this district does lack transparency, and there's a lot of things hidden and things are not clearly communicated. And many times I feel like a lot of schools take advantage of this on purpose. Both my kids have IEPs. When scheduling an IEP, it's actually supposed to be more in favor of the parents because sometimes parents have jobs and stuff like that. And just last year, my school was like, we have this time available. Sorry, that time doesn't work for me. And I made it clear that I knew the law, that they had to be more accommodating to me. And so we were able to work out something. But as for why many parents don't necessarily automatically volunteer, the second school my children went to, I tried reaching out to them again and again. And over 3 years at that school, I learned to hate that school. The third school I went to was better. I got a good relationship, but then the next school from my middle school, I have a terrible relationship to them, horrendous. And it's not just one admin, no, the principal, the assistant principal, the other assistant principal. Like they have progressively tried to not work with parents at many of these schools to the point my wife will not go to a CCSD school anymore. So yes, we need to reach out to them, but we need to look at how we're doing that. And I'm sorry, I forgot the man's name from earlier when he was talking about the different ethnic groups and some of the consequences of these actions. There's a lot that needs to go into this. At the same time, sometimes it's frustrating. My children are half Chinese. They were born in China. And last year at the school, they had a wonderful presentation regarding African American History Month and connected to the school choir. And during Asian American Pacific Islander Month, they celebrated Cinco de Mayo. And it's like, so we need to not only reach out to one group, we need to reach out to all the groups.
And I wanted to switch gears a little bit. I know class sizes is something many of you brought up to me. How many of you are concerned about class sizes? Okay. Brian, I know this is something that you have been talking about. You have a son at William Wright Elementary, if that's correct. Why don't you talk about class sizes and wanting consistency for your child?
Yes, I do have incoming first grade and a incoming fifth grader to this school season. And yeah, teacher shortage and, retention. Of course, that leads to class student to teacher ratios, which is, I think, pretty high. And then, it just really concerns me to where I know we need more teachers, and that way we could get that down, because, having lower student to teacher ratio, leads to better engagement of the students, especially for the young ones. And then, it's better learning for them too. So that's one of my major main issues on our school. Yeah.
And can I add in that the more students in a classroom, the more stressed and overworked our teachers are. We're facing a major shortage of teachers in Clark County School District and nationwide. But the more students we have in these compacted classrooms, the more work we're putting on teachers, the more behavior management that they're expected to engage in. There's just so much more work that goes into even just 1 to 2 additional students. I'm a former teacher in Clark County School District. I worked in K through 5 and 9 through 12 level. And honestly, like the smaller your class size is, the more manageable it is, the more you feel like you can actually support each student's individual needs, which is why, people are there in the first place, right?
And I know
who else wanted to comment on it? Go ahead.
Yeah, but I know our elementary school, we approved using our Title I funds to hire an additional second grade teacher because we had more second graders than first or third for this coming school year to keep that class size low. But my junior high, for example, they are so under attended. We don't have funds. We don't have a budget. We can barely buy paper based on the, people-centered funding formula. But what we had to approve last year, we were lucky to have copy paper at the junior high. And that's in Henderson. That's in a nice part of Henderson. So when central office makes decisions to cut Title I at like another 70 something schools, that's devastating for our local school sites, especially ones that really rely on that money to support the smaller class sizes. And then we also just got the notification that our SPED class size is going up. So depending where you are, they used to be under 8. And then we got a memo, I believe it's 10 to 12 for this year. And I have asked several times how many J1 teachers we lost to our 4 or 5-star schools and what that is going to look like for our special education classrooms who barely get an aid. So when you talk about school safety, as many of us all in this room know, our district pays out millions a year for abuse and neglect cases to our special education students. And to couple that back around with what Melvin said, there's not only accurate data for the disproportionate suspension and expulsions of our children of color, but a lot of our children of color are undiagnosed with intellectual developmental disabilities, mental behavioral health. And those are all issues that I know Camilla and I, have worked on over the last couple of years, and we continue to work on. But until we have correct data, we don't really even know how bad that really is, but we know the existing numbers are terrible.
I just wanted to say something to Brian's concern and piggybacking on Jessica and what she said, just like the efficacy of teachers when they can manage the group of kids in their room. And I think that is the only thing that saves these teachers from like a lashing from me when I'm being ignored, because I understand, I'm like, it's not something I'm built for on a day-to-day basis. It's a lot managing my 2 teenagers, let alone a room of 30. My concern on the classroom setup this year or this past year that we just finished was that there was so many substitutions. And I grew up in a time we had maybe 1 sub a year twice, and it was like a big deal, right? Like we got a sub. My children are getting subs once or twice a week, which breaks up consistency in learning, which, it's just really been challenging to find consistent teachers and people to work the whole day and the whole week.
And research shows, sorry for continuing, but research shows that schools that have a higher population of low income families, or a higher population of racial and ethnic diversity, or like a higher ratio of racial or ethnic diversity. And I think I said all the things. Those groups of students are most impacted by teacher shortages. And it especially impacts students with disabilities. We have so many long-term subs, in our special ed programs, and they are not properly trained to support student needs. They're not properly trained to facilitate IEPs, or even write IEPs, or understand how to progress monitor without somebody holding their hand. And we don't have that amount of staff to support that learning curve. So it's a major concern, especially for special populations, which there's been a shortage for special education teachers since the 1970s. And it's only been paid attention to now because general education classes are also starting to see a shortage of teachers. Sorry.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about that. I know several of you have students with IEPs and special needs, and from what I'm hearing, a lot of those IEPs aren't being met. Can some of you speak to that?
So actually, my son...
Jessica, 1 second. I just need to make a disclosure as we get into this. I am the vice chair of the Special Education Advisory Committee for the Nevada Department of Education. I am also governor appointed to the Council for Autism Spectrum Disorder, as well as Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. So I don't know if you've noticed, I've been taking notes as you guys talk too, but I have to make that disclosure. So, and I'll stay quiet because I want to hear from all of you.
Len, go ahead. Jessica, you go ahead.
I actually ended up leaving the district over an issue with my child. I had concerns about their learning progress, their speech progress that were overlooked. And then I took them to our home zone school, and they were overdue for the evaluation for his speech. They were concerned about his speech at the beginning of the school year. He didn't get evaluated until January, past the 60 days. Then we finally actually held the MDT in April, where they told me that he had a severe speech delay. But, you know, in the year prior, when I had voiced my concerns, there was nothing being done. And when it came time to speak to somebody in the district about getting his evaluation done and planning that, they tried to dissuade me from getting services for my son, for getting him assessed, because he wasn't as bad as other people. But then he was found to have a severe speech delay. That's just an example of how kids fall through the cracks in the district. And I was a teacher at the time. Like, that's what's wild to me, is that I was a special ed teacher. I know the law. Like, a lot of parents and their students aren't getting the services they deserve because, first of all, special ed teachers don't know the law. They're not taught the law. They're not taught everything that can be provided to students and what can be done. They're just told through the district what they should be providing and planning for students. And anything outside of that is seen as uncomfortable or difficult. And it's unfortunate because our students just aren't getting their needs met. Progress monitoring isn't happening in a lot of behavior classes, and that's a requirement for those students in behavioral programs to have progress monitoring of their behavioral data. And I've seen that firsthand as a teacher. There's a lot of stuff that's just not happening for our students with disabilities, and parents don't know their rights, and they rush through the meetings. They rush them through the meetings in 40-minute periods when really it's supposed to be at the pace that's necessary for the team to collaborate effectively. And that's just another way that we prevent parents and families from connecting with schools and trusting schools, because we rush them through the process. And especially for our parents and families who speak any language other than English, a 40-minute meeting with a translator, I mean, you're whipping through that thing. They're not really getting a chance to absorb the information, ask questions, because the goal of the school is to get through the meeting so you can move on to the next. So it's just really concerning that we're as parents not supported by the district either in learning what our rights are effectively. They just kind of, they do read the rights at the meeting. I'm not going to try and say that they don't do that, but there's a lot that's not shared with parents and families that should be.
Yeah, go ahead, Lenny. I saw that you were nodding your head, and this is a discussion we've had. Why don't you comment on your child has been impacted by this directly as well?
Well, no, first of all, she, and I forgot her name, was commenting about how many special education teachers are not trained on the law. And I want to say, yes, that's a problem, but I actually think the bigger problem is the general education teachers that are not trained on the law, and the number of general education teachers that don't even take the time to read the IEP. This is really frustrating because my son who's going into grade 8, in grade 6 was criticized by a teacher for not taking notes, written into his IEP for note-taking accommodation, dyslexia, dysgraphia. In grade 7 happened again, and it happened again even after the due process settlement. So it's so frustrating because there are so many teachers that don't know, and even I've met speech pathologists that are not really advocating for the kids as much as they should. And I've literally been told at one school that I shouldn't actually be advocating for my students as much as I am because they're not my children. And yet that's what every teacher should be doing. We should be trying to get these kids the services they need. My last IEP, I informed the school that they need to make sure they at least made a 2-hour block of time because I knew that IEP was going to take longer than 40 minutes. They were shocked and surprised, but thankfully I now have a good case manager. But it's really shocking. Just you have a lot of special education facilitators that are not advocating for the students, that are not making sure the IEPs are followed, that don't know the special education laws because they do what they are told by CCSD. I've talked with some of the special education region coordinators that I'm sorry, they should just be fired or retrained. And I could go into 2 examples, but I think it was 3 years ago, might have been 4, Sid Rogich, the family won a really big lawsuit against CCSD regarding dyslexia. And some teachers were happy, like, yes, we're going to finally start getting some dyslexia intervention and trainings. No, we're not. Like, it's not happening. And I would love to see the data, because sometimes data is talked about, but let's put that into practical terms. It's pretty much known that at least 10% of all students have dyslexia. That doesn't mean that they necessarily need interventions, but it means that they have it. If you look at the IEPs, most of them are often written for a specific learning disability. Okay, so then they literally have a dyslexia box inside that then should be checked if they think that child has dyslexia. It's basically never checked. Why? Because then they'd actually have to admit it, and yet they're supposed to. There's a state law that they don't follow. So it's a really big issue, and honestly, there's just going to be more lawsuits, and it's sad because then it takes money out of the schools that should be going to providing the services. And a good example of that is, again, the due process that I had to file because my son's school thought they knew better, and I'm like, look, I know the law in this case, and they wouldn't. So yeah.
There we go. I've actually personally heard a high school teacher complain that in one particular school year that like 70 of his students throughout all 6 of his periods had IEPs. And he was going off about it. He slammed the paperwork down on his desk and he said, I'm not reading this stuff. And I can't imagine where those kids are today. And I've also had, when my 14-year-old was in elementary school, a gen ed teacher who was supposed to attend the IEPs with us when we had our, first end of school year one. She sat at the table and like scoffed the whole time and said she could not believe that focusing on my son's behavior was more important than his actual education. and left the room, wouldn't participate.
Melvin, I know you wanted to say something.
Yes, and I think that what I'm hearing is from these parents who are dealing with this situation is that even beyond the support with teachers and everything else, another compounding factor is the amount per student that CCSD spends. We are drastically low in comparison to other institutions and even smaller districts, larger districts who are 1 through 4 in comparison to us in size. They're spending large amounts of money. I mean, you're talking about at least an additional $3,000 to $4,000 per student minimum that they're spending, which then added to the support that we need would help support our parents and these students who need that extra guidance and extra due diligence on behalf of the district with regard to students with IEPs and other learning and behavioral disabilities.
Mila, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, it's okay. Thank you so much for having this conversation, Tiffany. I wear 3 hats. I'm a parent, educator, and also an advocate. And as a parent, I've been able to also support other parents in the district. And I think, Tiffany, what you're doing is exactly what the Clark County School District leadership needs to do. They need to provide more opportunities to really listen to what parents have to say, and then create actionable plans to address some of the issues. I've always been a proponent that the district lacks customer service. And education is a service that not only we, the parents, pay for as taxpayers. And I know that I have had some particular situations with Latina and Leslie. I don't know if they wanted to share a little bit of what some of their concerns were. But thank you so much for doing this, Tiffany. I think you're modeling exactly what our leadership should be doing for parents and their families and students.
Well, thank you. And Leslie, why don't you go ahead?
Hey, everyone. I was just letting you guys, I was going to speak last, but me and Latina are both parents that we're at the school. We're visiting the school. We're doing whatever we have to do to support our daughter. And both our daughters was bullied at the school. We reported it, and it ended up to being where both our daughters were expelled in different situations. And we reported it, and we asked for help, and we kept asking for help. And even till today, we ask for help. And we just haven't got the help. And we're there, we're at the schools, we're helping the school, we're visiting the school, we're meeting with teachers. Both our daughters are in extracurricular, both of them make A's and B's. And we just weren't getting the help. And we're physically there at the school. We're physically helping at the school. We do everything we can to support the school. School calls us, we're there. We won't take the phone conversation. We listen to, we get letters saying there's bullying going on. The letters aren't clear. Who's the bully? It's just, we're not getting the help we need, and we're there. We're present, and that's our issue. Our daughter got bullied to the point she was expelled, and because she was backed into a corner and she had to fight. Both our daughters had the similar situation, and we just, we really just needed help from the school. So in our situation, we were just caught between a rock and a hard place. Because we went to get the help. We kept asking for the help. We did the school gave us advice on what to do. We used their advice. And now my daughters have this on their record. One graduates this year. She has to explain why she was expelled out of high school on her college applications. So it's like, we're there, we're present, we're helping out, we're doing everything we're supposed to do as a parent, and we just didn't get the help we needed.
How many of you have experienced issues with bullying when it comes to your students, or also have concerns regarding bullying? Okay. And does it feel like the district, and I know, Leslie, you said that the school and the district didn't really help in your situation. What about the rest of you?
I'll speak up if that's okay. Last year, the school did one thing that I thought was quite good. They actually did practice restorative justice or restorative practices. In that situation, I felt it was good. After the event, they also implemented a school safety plan, again, which I thought was pretty good. Some of the difficulties came later on. And again, as I think it was Leslie was commenting that he talked to school, he complained, nothing ever changed. For the one bullying that they took serious that year, there were so many other events that they didn't. And on the second safety plan that we worked on, they had that my child would not use his hands at any time. And I said, no, I'm not going to sign that, because I want my child to know that if someone's bullying him, backing him into a corner, or attacking him, that he has every right to defend himself. So there's a lot of situations going on. And I do also think that bullying is very underreported. Sometimes the schools will purposely try to work with some teachers or parents to try to not classify it as that, even though they're not supposed to, but I've seen that happen.
And when after the pandemic, when the kids went back to school, my 14-year-old was in 6th grade, and him and another boy just couldn't leave each other alone. It was terrible. Neither one was absconded of any innocence, if you know what I mean. But after doing all of those things, they reassigned my son to that kid's bus, to his sped bus, which honestly, I filed a federal complaint about, because there was already a bus for my neighbor's son across the street that my son had been riding, because they make one stop, right? They drop both the boys off right here and pick both the boys up. There's no need for another bus to come in to my neighborhood to pick my son up. They, in retaliation, placed my son on this kid's bus and thought that was going to be okay. And so the next day after that happened, guess what happened on the bus ride home? And then they tried to ban my son from transportation. And I said, well, let's just see what the feds say, because you did do that in retaliation to me and then to my son, right? And so for a year and a half now, Tiffany, Eli hasn't had sped transportation, because I don't trust that they haven't somewhere strategically put this kid in his path, right? I mean, my kid now rides his own bike to school because he's safer than getting on a Clark County School District special education bus.
Yeah, we had the principal tell us that her bullying, my daughter would go and report the bullying, and the assistant principal told us she felt like that wasn't bullying. And within a week later, they were fighting because she was cornered. So same thing here. Like, we report the bullying, and nothing is happening. And we skipped the assistant principals. We went straight to the principal, and we started meeting with him. And even then, now both our daughters have records with the school, which had problems all year that they've been there. And now they have these records that they put on the kids' records, and they were suspended up until the point they were expelled. And now our bully is going to the same school as our daughter. They changed the schools of my daughter, and now they put the bully in the same schools of my daughter. It doesn't make sense. Right. Like, we're not getting no help here.
And I know procedurally the district typically offers the bullied child to change schools if it's that bad. But most of the parents that I help, they don't want to abandon their schools. They shouldn't have to abandon their schools. That's like, but you can't force the perpetrator in those instances to move a school either. It's really disheartening. And I think so many of us know it's terrible how quick they are to suspend and or expel in those instances, because some, again, like, if, let's just say in a real world, right? Kids aren't perfect. They do pick on each other. They are very mean to each other. Look at adults. I mean, come on, go check any Facebook group chat. You're going to find grown adults arguing like they're in 2nd grade. But at the end of the day, when we see students that are targeted, suspended, and expelled for defending themselves, that's where we have a huge systemic problem, because I don't think any of us sitting here were raised. I know when I was growing up, I was told, you throw first, you're in trouble. But if you're protecting yourself, I'll stand by you. And I think that's how most of us raise our children. They have to be able to protect themselves.
I think the whole bullying discussion also plays into the mental health space. And Rudy, I know you're in the health arena and you have different points, whether bullying or other areas. What would you like to see?
So I think early action, just, to the theme of everyone's, especially the bullying topic, is that like the healthcare system, right? Like you don't get treatment or care unless you're actually sick, unless it actually happens. But you could have all the red flags going off, you could have all the warning signs, but the healthcare system's not going to take care of you until you are diagnosed sick, ill, whatever they want to call it. And that's how this is. It's that when there's red flags in place, when there's, warning signs, it needs to be addressed, at least have a protocol to address things, these small actual pieces to start to get the discussion going. Because in healthcare, if someone does not start treatment until they have stage 4 cancer, their likelihood of death is high, right? But if you can see all right, my likelihood of getting into trouble down the road with this illness is pretty high, I need to start doing what I can now to mitigate that, then you can have a better shot, for a longer lifespan, health span, however you're going to call it. Same here. If there's risk factors that someone can identify in their environment, and we can start to influence that environment in a positive way to mitigate these events from actually occurring, then you don't have this. But it's just, whether it's the school district being handcuffed and not being able to do anything until something actually happens or not, I don't know. Again, I'm new to the system with only an incoming second grader, but these early actions, need to happen in all issues that we face in our life, whether it be healthcare, whether it be with our children in the school district.
Brian, for you, your kids are also younger. Is mental health a concern for you? It seems like they may have had some of the COVID time playing into when they started school as well. So they had some time distance learning in their short time in our schools.
Yes, definitely. I mean, mental, my child right now, my son was going to have because he's diagnosed with minor autism, so he does going to the IAP program, which is helpful, but I think he needs more too. I mean, right now, currently, or the previous school year, because he was only kindergarten, he was only going once a week through that therapy session, but he will help out if it's something towards continuous and more. I mean, I haven't experienced the bullying yet because, this is new to the system and both my kids are still young. But it is a concern too later on down the line, of course.
Camila, is this something you want to talk about, just the mental health realm?
Absolutely. I think the behavioral and mental health is it has to be a priority in the district. And, I'm very critical of our leaders who make 6 figures and sit around tables and make some of the poorest decisions that I could possibly think of. For example, Clark County School District spent about $55 million for the paper tutoring, which is not only giving money to another company to provide tutoring to students they do not know. That money could have been utilized not only to support teachers and our support staff, but it also could have been used to provide more behavioral health supports for our students. So when we talk about funding, as a parent, my tax dollars are going to support some of these decisions that are not at all supporting what our students really need. And I think that we do have to really hold our board of school trustees accountable, and also our superintendent for making these decisions with millions of dollars that are just going and funneling to places that are not supporting our students' mental health.
In addition, the Clark County Children's Consortium has a report out that I distributed to the governor's Behavioral Mental Health Advisory Council. And that report was written in response to the Office of Civil Rights notification to the state of Nevada that Nevada improperly institutionalizes our behavioral mental health children instead of providing them adequate services. If anybody would like a copy of those, I'll drop my email down in the chat. Just shoot me an email. I'll send those back. They're very voluminous, but they're a huge insight into what Clark County and potentially what the state's going to be looking at to, try to make a 5-year plan to remedy some of the issues that the Office of Civil Rights found during their investigation.
Would also like to add, I was part of a focus group that focused on I believe it was $750 million that came to the Clark County School District from ARPA dollars. And one of the reoccurring and common themes of students was mental health support, especially from COVID. I mean, this was a once in a 100 year occurrence that our students had to go through. And that money should have been used to support and effectively build not only our counselor support, but also investing in organizations that provide wraparound services with regard to mental health support. The funding was not, from my understanding, was not adequately used in that space, according to Anna. And that is a major issue. That is a major problem that we need to address. Why are these dollars not being used for what they're supposed to be used for?
I can 100% guarantee you, Melvin, that the two highly used companies, which is Boys Town of Nevada and Communities and Schools, saw nowhere near $750 million from the Clark County School District. And they are in our campuses and they are providing wraparound services. I know Communities and Schools just secured quite a bit of money to expand. They're all over the state, not just Clark County. And the presentation I saw, their return on investment is amazing. And same with Boys Town. So, but that goes back a couple years when Clark County School District had, they say, like, the community meetings where they listen to everybody on where to spend some of that ESSER and ART money. And I think it was ESSER 2, correct me if I'm wrong, Camilla, but they came up, with that beautiful little spreadsheet of what the community said they should spend the money on. But as we sit here today and look back at the last 2 years, we know that it's been spent on a bunch of crud. And, but like Camilla said, I mean, like, we have to hold our elected officials accountable. And that's really hard when only a few of us can show up. We don't mind doing it. But, it would be really great one day if I went and made a post and said, hey, everybody, this is happening. But sometimes I know we can't get a lot of parents united to just stand up. I may not believe in what Brian wants to fight for, and Lenny maybe doesn't agree with what I like to fight for, but we don't unite, and they take advantage of us because we don't do that. And I think that I know a few in the community, we try to stand up for as many things as we can and draw attention to parents and interested community members. But really, at the end of the day, we have a huge lack of connection in our community. And it can be a lot of things, right? Like work shifts, right? We have, night shift and day shift and swing shift, and, everyone's on this different schedule or whatever it is. Politics, I mean, put it down to anything. But until such a day that parents can unite for at least one thing, like back when we had to fight to get sports back, and back when we had to fight to get schools open. If I could just get parents in the community to stand behind a few of us and let us fight for you, but be there when we need you to send an email, that sucks. When some of us are just crying in meetings because we're getting first chair seats to how these people who don't care about our kids and don't invest in our communities make decisions that hurt our children. And it's hurtful. It's very hurtful. And then I have sometimes to turn around, right? Like some of us to a fellow parent and have to explain to them why our children are screwed.
I wholeheartedly agree with you, Anna. Connection begets accountability. And that's where we're lacking. We're lacking the connection as a community to rally around our children to provide them the best future possible. And until we get to that point, accountability will fall to the wayside.
I know we talked about a lot of different topics today. I just want to make sure before we wrap, because I don't want to take too much of your time. Is there anything else important to all of you that you want to really touch upon before we end this conversation?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So right now, Clark County does not have a contract for their teachers. It's a big issue. They're talking about possibly maybe having a delay in opening school. Nothing's been set in stone yet. So I think parents really should be pushing the district to be supporting the teachers, paying them what they deserve, and support staff too. They need an increase in their wages as well. And making sure that they have a contract in place that's fair and reasonable before the start of the school year, because that's ultimately going to hurt all of us in the community. And if we're not pushing the district to honor our teachers, then they're not going to think that we care about it. And we're talking about mental health. If we care about the mental health of our children, we must care about the mental health of our teachers. Teachers' working conditions are student learning conditions.
And I spent more time than any parent up in the legislature this past session advocating for as big of a raise as we could get those teachers. And the teachers union likes to call me a union buster because I consistently speak out about how much they deserve. And maybe it's just because I think they deserve the world and their union's not fighting for the world. I don't know. But they do like to call me a union buster, but I'm not a union buster. I mean, these are the people we entrust with our children 5 days a week, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours a day. If we can't pay them, we can't expect them to take care of them.
Anything else that anybody else would like to add before we end the conversation?
You should make this a normal thing, Tiffany.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, and thank you all for participating in this today. I love hearing different voices. And Lenny, was there something you wanted to say?
Let me say one. Yeah, I just wanted one quick thing. Just my fire has not been as great last couple minutes. One, for any parent that does see this, if you have issues with your school, please make sure you put it in writing. Sometimes schools will ignore things, but when it's in writing, it's harder to ignore. And if you think you have issues going on, feel free to reach out to the community, because there are people that will help advocate with you, help tell you some of the next steps to do.
And before we end, actually, Jessica and Leslie, if you could actually in the chat put your email so I can stay in contact with you as well, that would be great. But I would love to have more of these conversations and get even more parents involved in this. And I'm sure as we get into the school year, there may be some additional concerns that you may have, or different things that you see that we didn't get to talk about today. So feel free to reach out to me at any time. You have my cell phone. I'm accessible at all times. So thank you so much for participating today on this discussion. I hope you have a wonderful return of back to school for your children.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Thanks, Tiff.
Thank you.